So as I'm sure at least some of you have heard or seen at this point, Cyberpunk 2077's 1.1 update has some issues and some undocumented changes to go along with it. These not being a huge plethora of things, but some pretty critical things that will affect gameplay, including a game-breaking bug. Fortunately, we actually have some fixes for that, some responses from CD Projekt, as well as some just community workarounds. If you guys want to see my full video on the 1.1 update, including some of the performance differences, as well as the patch notes overall, I'll have that linked in the eye. But first and foremost, we have to talk about the new game-breaking bug added in with this update. Now, fortunately, this will not affect everyone as it is quest specific, and it is regarding the quest down on the street. This being a Takemura focused quest, it's a pretty simple one. You'll go meet with him, meet with some other people, eventually make your way over to Jig Street and have a meeting with the local fixer. And this is the critical point here. After this meeting ends and you exit this location, you'll have the option to talk to Takemura, and then from there, you'll have to wait 24 hours when he figures some stuff out behind the scenes, and then he'll give you a call. This is where the problem comes in, as many users are experiencing a bug where Takemura will call you and then just stay on your screen. So you'll literally just have him sitting there, he won't actually go through the dialogue, and this has a couple of implications. Right off the bat, you'll have Takemura stuck on your screen, which is pretty unideal. Particularly, this is unideal because it had that 24-hour waiting period. A lot of people went and did other quests in the interim, so if you were to load up the earlier save, you would lose quite a bit of progress. But even further, of course, it does mean you can't actually progress the main story. At the point in my save game I have here, this is the final main story quest I have, so I have to do this one to progress. And although at first glance it looked like this was basically affecting everyone, it isn't, and I could say because it actually didn't affect me. I had a totally separate issue where Takemura wouldn't even call me at all. I waited 24 hours, in fact I waited like 2 weeks in game time, tried doing other quests or jobs in the interim, and he just never called. I ended up having to actually restart the game, die, and load an earlier save. Seems like that is a separate bug that is happening less often for people, but unrelated to this main one we're talking about here. As far as a potential fix for this one, CD Projekt Red has basically said the way you can fix this is, firstly, load an earlier save where you and Takemura are still in the fixer's office, so before you guys exit and go out into the street. After you load the save, basically go through things typically, exit the building with Takemura, and then immediately talk to him. Get through all of the dialogue, and then get to the point where your quest objective is to wait 24 hours, typically when this conversation will just end. From there, immediately wait 23 hours. I don't know why that number was chosen, but CD Projekt said 23 hours specifically, or their support said that. And then from here, just simply wait a little while, and then eventually Takemura will call you and it should work. For me, it took a couple of minutes IRL time. Like I literally was sitting at my desk for a few minutes before I got the call. I didn't try and progress anything to mess with it. And it seems like this has been working for some people at the very least. Of course, this does mean though, you have to load an earlier save or even have a save at that point. Now for some of you, you'll probably have an easy autosave. For some other people, you might not have a save at all. You might just be kind of stuck, as I know a lot of people have all of their saves being affected by this, so whenever they load a save, they'll just immediately get the phone call and have Takemura stuck on their screen. Another fix tested out by the community is go through all the same steps until you're waiting for Takemura to call you and you're just kind of standing here waiting around. If for some reason that isn't working for you and you're getting increasingly frustrated with this, there's some other community fixes posted online. In one, it involves calling somebody else. So after waiting 24 hours and Takemura is going to call you in the next couple of minutes, call somebody else like Judy and just leave them on the phone. Then when Takemura calls and you exit the call from Judy, it should exit both screens so you don't get stuck with his face on your screen. Then a short while later, Takemura will call a second time, and this time it'll actually have the dialogue. I haven't tested that, but that is another one floating around that you could try. One of the other pretty big undocumented changes with this is that you can no longer re-roll legendaries or just items in general in the world. So previously, a common thing you could do in Cyberpunk that I know a lot of people, including myself, would take advantage of is the re-roll mechanic. What this meant was basically, let's say you found an enemy that had a legendary drop on them, or you just knew a location in game that would consistently drop one legendary. There are a couple of static spawns across the map. You could find a lot of guides online to get these early on. In the past build of the game, if you would actually make a quick save before looting that enemy you're looking at the legendary, you can re-roll it. So you'd go up to it, it'd have certain stats or a certain number of mod slots, and then you could load your past save, run up to it again, and it would have different stats or different mod slots. But now unfortunately with this update that has been removed, you can no longer refresh items, and it basically seems like whenever an item drops, it'll always just have those stats. There's no more cycling through them. And you might think, okay, that makes a ton of sense, and that's a fair observation. The problem with this is you'll sometimes just be worse off. So for example, take these pants in particular. They're a legendary item with 2 mod slots. The best build would be this item item with 3 mod slots. There's only one version of this item in the world. This is the singular drop. So in this particular save, this item now will just always be worse. I'll have other pants with 3 mod slots, which is the ideal. That's really what you want on a top tier build. And if I wanted to use these pants, I'd have to sacrifice that. I can no longer re-roll them to get the optimal 3 slots, and there's no other ways legitimately in game to get a 3rd slot, unfortunately. This is even a bit more frustrating in that you could do this re-roll method with certain items in boxes. So certain items you could find in a crate that you could just loot in the game, some of these being unique items or one-off items that just had static spawns, and you could reload a save, and sometimes reloading the save would lead to it re-rolling into a legendary version. So you might find it as an epic variant, but after reloading a save, it instead would pop up as a legendary variant. That too has been removed, so now you're going to have to actually spec all the way deep into the crafting tree if you ever wanted to upgrade it. It's not necessarily the biggest issues in the world, but that last one, of course, can be pretty frustrating if you really cared about your character's appearance. I, for one, don't, but it is a fairly large undocumented change because I know a lot of people were abusing this just to get the best stats on items. Oh, one last one that is worth noting. It seems like crowd density has been boosted on the PC version of the game somewhat, so crowds in general will now just be a bit more plentiful, at least in my testing. It's not a huge night and day difference, and honestly it doesn't affect that much about the game, but it seems like some of those optimizations may have allowed a few extra NPCs to spawn. At least that's what it looks like to me. One other thing I wanted to bring up, just in case you were experiencing this, but is super subjective and not really confirmed one way or another. Some people are noticing on PC they have significantly worse performance, like a 10 to 15 FPS drop in certain areas. For me, I actually noticed a couple of extra FPS in some of the more secluded or not as packed areas, especially while driving. So I wanted to bring up some of those reports, but it's kind of hard to gauge the accuracy of them. Not many of these people are actually doing before and after comparisons of FPS. Most people don't record FPS just to test it later with the patch, but it's definitely something to consider and look into, especially if you again are experiencing some of those problems. Overall, I found the community response to this one to be pretty interesting. A lot of people were hoping for more from this update, and you could completely understand why. And of course, the update is now getting memed to death because it did add in a game-breaking bug. I feel like that's just one of those things where CD Projekt is on thin ice with the community, so any step backs like this are immediately going to lead to a lot of backlash. That's not to say it isn't deserved, but stuff like this would be amplified always because it's Cyberpunk 2077. Something to consider with this one that's not necessarily defending CD Projekt Red, but just worth noting is this didn't have a ton of dev time. It was really only probably 2 weeks, if that, just because the devs had an extended break over the holiday. They were just crunching a bunch, and specifically it was said they are not crunching right now or not forced to be crunching. And of course you have to ship the update early to get it certified, so it's not like they could finish last night at the final minute. And I think this next update is going to be the more telling one. If it again disappoints or doesn't have big overhauls for the game in general, that's going to be pretty bad because CD Projekt has been touting that as the larger one. I think expectations are definitely a bit higher as a result, although they also touted this one as being a bit larger, and it doesn't really feel like it had a larger impact than that initial hotfix. And of course, it's also worth noting we still don't have the game on the PlayStation Store. I'm sure CD Projekt really wants to get it back up on that. Either way though, those are my thoughts. Those are some of the other things to come out around this update since its initial release. Hopefully you guys found this one informative, but until next time, I thank you for watching again, and I hope to see you all later.